My mom brought the man who did things to me to my OB appointment so he could hear his great-grandson's heartbeat, then cut me off completely when I refused to name my baby after him. The next day, she filed a CPS report claiming I had prenatal psychosis and tried to steal my newborn from my hospital room. When I asked why, she smiled and said, "Because you don't deserve him." I didn't say a word. I just knew it was time to go nuclear. It's always been obvious that my mom never loved me, but it wasn't until I was pregnant that I finally got some hardcore evidence, because my mom was obsessed with having my baby named after Grandpa Gerald. You see, to my mom, he was a sweet old man, but to me, he was my childhood nightmare. The man who locked me in closets until I wet myself, the one who'd starve me and laugh at me begging for food, the one who stole my innocence. And it's not like my mom didn't know about it. She did. She just didn't care because that's just how his generation was raised. So when she asked for the millionth time, I told her no. I made sure my tone was extra assertive in the hopes that she'd finally back off, but it didn't work, and suddenly her face was filled with anger. "You're being selfish. He's dying," she responded. I rolled my eyes. My mom had been using the "he's dying" card for 10 years straight. "Mom, the baby's name is already chosen. It's Lucas. After everything we've done for you, you ungrateful little..." She then glanced around at the party guests and stopped herself from going off on me. "We'll discuss this later." And somehow, later, turned into 3 weeks of psychological warfare. Aunts appearing at my workplace, cousins flooding my phone with guilt trips, my father timing his visits for when my husband left for his shifts, cornering me with lectures about respect and family legacy. Each interaction was the same script. Honor Gerald. Don't break your mother's heart. Stop being selfish. The breaking point came at my 36-week appointment, because as I walked into the waiting room, it felt like someone had punched me in the gut. Sitting right there was my grandfather Gerald, surrounded by my parents. My mother smiled sweetly. We thought Gerald should hear his great-grandchild's heartbeat. When he reached for my stomach with his greedy hands, something in me shattered. "His name is Lucas," I said loudly. "The baby's name is Lucas. It will never be Gerald. Ever." The waiting room went silent. My mother slowly stood, looked me in the eyes, and delivered her verdict. "Then you're no longer our daughter." They walked out without saying a word. That same evening, I noticed my phone plan had been disconnected. They'd removed me from the family plan without warning. Every relative blocked me. The family group chat I'd been part of for years suddenly showed, "You've been removed. No holidays, no help when I needed it. Complete exile." Rock bottom hit 3 days later. I was standing in front of the cashier at Bye Bye Baby trying to purchase a car seat when my card declined. The joint account I'd shared with my parents for emergencies drained and closed. As soon as I got into my car, I immediately started to howl with a deep sadness. The loneliness was so painful that I did something completely insane. I called my mother-in-law, aka the mother of the man who abandoned me. The tears made it hard to speak properly over the phone, but 45 minutes after sharing my location with her, she showed up at the car park. I moved into the passenger seat and she drove me to her home, no questions asked. And as soon as she let me into her home, I felt even worse, because she wrapped his arms around me and warmly welcomed me in. I broke down crying, because the whole thing made me realize how terrible my parents actually are. I ended up opening up to him, and he seemed completely shocked by what I said and asked me to repeat everything. So I recounted the morning's events, and his friendly smile instantly transformed into an angry scowl. "Those absolute bastards," she kept muttering. Then she set down her tea and showed something that chilled me. "Your mother's been calling me for weeks," she said, voice shaking. She hit play on her voicemails. That's when I heard it. My mother's voice, calm and concerned, explained how I'd been struggling with prenatal psychosis, how I'd stopped taking crucial medications. The final voicemail suggested Patricia, my aunt, should help them document concerns for future interventions if necessary. The realization hit like ice water. This wasn't about a name. This was about control, and they were laying groundwork to come after my child the same way Grandpa Gerald came for me. "They're building a case," I whispered. Patricia nodded grimly. "Do you have any proof of what they've really been like?" she asked. The thing is, I did, and soon I would make everyone regret how they treated me. Because a mother's love might be conditional in my family, but a mother's rage when protecting her child, that was something they'd never seen before. I spent the next 3 hours showing Patricia everything. My hands shook as I pulled up folder after folder on my phone. 3 years of recordings my therapist had suggested I keep after particularly bad gaslighting incidents. Voicemails where my mom screamed at me for embarrassing her at church. Texts from my dad calling me ungrateful and selfish. Videos I'd secretly taken during family dinners where they'd mock me until I cried. Patricia watched everything with this look on her face that got darker and darker. She took notes in her teacher handwriting, organizing everything by date. When I showed her the recording from when I announced my pregnancy, she actually gasped. My mother's hammered voice slurred through the phone speaker. "Remember what we did to cousin Rebecca when she wouldn't let Uncle Harold walk her down the aisle? Nobody talks to her anymore. Or do you want to end up like Aunt Dorothy? Even her own kids pretend she doesn't exist." I'd forgotten how cold her voice sounded, how she'd said it while smiling at me across the dinner table. My dad had just nodded along, cutting his steak like threatening family members was normal dinner conversation. Patricia helped me compile the worst examples into one file. We worked until midnight, organizing everything chronologically. My back hurt from sitting so long, but I couldn't stop. Every recording I played made me angrier. How had I normalized this for so long? "This one," Patricia said, pointing at a voicemail from 2 years ago. "This is evidence of long-term emotional abuse." The recording was my mom telling me I was worthless because I'd missed Gerald's birthday dinner. I'd been in the hospital with food poisoning, but she didn't care. According to her, I was just being dramatic and trying to hurt Gerald's feelings. By 2 a.m., we had everything organized. 53 recordings, over 200 screenshots, years of abuse documented and filed. Patricia made backup copies on 3 different USB drives. "What are you going to do with it?" she asked. I thought about all the family members who'd lectured me, all the cousins who'd called me selfish, all the aunts who'd ambushed me at work. They all thought they knew the truth. They all believed my parents' version of events. Yes. I'm going to show everyone exactly who my parents really are, I said. Patricia nodded slowly. Good, but be smart about it. They're already trying to build a case against you. I knew she was right, but I was too angry to be strategic. I spent the next hour creating a video compilation of the worst recordings, added subtitles so nothing could be misunderstood. By the time I finished, the sun was coming up and the video was 52 minutes long. I posted it on Facebook at 6 a.m., tagged every family member I could think of, every church friend who'd ever told me to honor my parents, every neighbor who thought my mom was such a sweet woman. Then I turned off my phone and tried to sleep. The first contraction hit at 5 a.m. the next morning. It felt like someone was squeezing my entire midsection with a vice. I'd been sleeping on Patricia's guest bed and the pain woke me instantly. It's probably just Braxton Hicks, I told myself. But then another one hit 10 minutes later, then 8 minutes, then 6. I knocked on Patricia's door and she took one look at me and started grabbing her keys. Hospital. Now, the ride was a blur of contractions and Patricia running red lights. She kept talking to keep me calm, but I couldn't focus on the words. All I could think about was that I was about to meet my son. Lucas was coming. They admitted me immediately. The contractions were 3 minutes apart and getting stronger. Patricia stayed with me, holding my hand when my husband couldn't be there because he was stuck at work. She fed me ice chips and reminded me to breathe. 14 hours. That's how long it took. 14 hours of pain that made me understand why they call it labor. But then suddenly there he was, Lucas. Perfect and screaming and mine. The nurse placed him on my chest and everything else disappeared. His tiny fingers wrapped around mine and I forgot about my parents, forgot about the video, forgot about everything except this perfect little person I'd created. He's beautiful, Patricia whispered, tears streaming down her face. I was exhausted, but I couldn't stop staring at him. He had my nose and his father's chin. When he opened his eyes, they were the same dark brown as mine. Nothing like Gerald's cold blue ones. The peace lasted exactly one day. I was still recovering, trying to figure out breastfeeding, when my nurse Sarah came in looking uncomfortable. There's been some people calling, she said carefully, claiming to be emergency contacts, but they're not listed on your forms. My stomach dropped. My parents? She nodded. They've called 6 times in the last hour, demanding information about you and the baby. We haven't told them anything because of HIPAA, but I wanted you to know. Patricia's face went hard. They're escalating. I was about to respond when someone knocked on the door. A woman in a suit walked in carrying a clipboard. Everything about her screamed government worker. I'm Janet from Child Protective Services, she said. We've received some concerning reports about your mental state and need to do an evaluation. My whole body went cold. They'd actually done it. They'd called CPS on me while I was still bleeding from childbirth. Lucas started crying and I held him tighter. I'd like to see some identification, Patricia said, stepping between us. Janet showed her badge and paperwork. It was all legitimate. Multiple reports filed expressing concern about my mental stability and ability to care for a newborn. The reports mentioned prenatal psychosis, refusal to take medication, and paranoid delusions about family members. This is insane, I said. I just gave birth yesterday. I understand this is difficult timing, Janet said, but when we receive reports, we have to investigate. I just need to ask you some questions. Patricia pulled out her phone. I'm calling Linda. Don't say anything until she gets here. Linda was Patricia's friend from her book club who happened to be a family lawyer. She arrived 20 minutes later looking furious. She'd obviously seen my video, which had apparently gone viral overnight. Don't answer anything without me present, Linda told me. Then to Janet, my client has just given birth and is recovering. Any questioning needs to be appropriate to her medical condition. Janet started with basic questions. Was I taking any medications? Did I have any mental health diagnoses? Had I been seeing a therapist? I answered honestly. No medications, no diagnoses except anxiety. And yes, I'd been seeing a therapist for years to deal with childhood trauma. The reports mention you've been making accusations against family members, Janet said carefully. They're not accusations if they're true, I said. Linda pulled out her phone. Have you seen this video? It has 50,000 views and hundreds of comments from other family members corroborating the abuse. Janet watched a few minutes of the compilation, her face growing more and more troubled. This is extensive documentation. That's when the door burst open. My parents walked in with a man in an expensive suit who was obviously their lawyer. My mother's eyes went straight to Lucas in my arms. We're here to protect our grandchild, she announced. You need to leave, Linda said immediately. You're not on the approved visitor list. We have rights, my father said. He looked older somehow, like the last few days had aged him. That's our grandson. Their lawyer stepped forward. We're filing for emergency custody based on the mother's documented mental health issues. He pulled out a folder thick with papers. We have evidence of paranoid delusions, refusal to take prescribed medications, and erratic behavior that puts the child at risk. What medications? I asked. I've never been prescribed anything for mental health. My mother's smile was cold. Dr. Morrison prescribed mood stabilizers when you were 16. You refused to take them. Dr. Morrison was your friend from church who saw me for 10 minutes, I shot back. He wasn't even a psychiatrist. Their lawyer kept pulling out papers, notes supposedly from therapy sessions I'd never attended, prescriptions for medications I'd never heard of. They'd created an entire false medical history. This is fabricated, Linda said, examining the documents. These dates don't even make sense. She would have been 12 years old here. That's when my sister Catherine walked in. I hadn't seen her in months. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and I felt hope for a second. Maybe she'd come to support me. I'm so worried about the baby, she said, and my hope crumbled. I've witnessed some really concerning behavior. She's not stable enough to care for a newborn. Catherine, what are you doing? I asked. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm just telling the truth. Remember last month when you had that breakdown at lunch? You were talking about conspiracies and saying everyone was out to get you. We never had lunch last month, I said slowly. You canceled on me. Again. Patricia suddenly pulled out her phone. That's interesting, Catherine. She hit play on a recording app. I hadn't known she'd been recording calls, but there it was. Catherine's voice clear as day. Hey Patricia, it's Catherine. Look, I'm really sorry, but Mom and Dad promised to pay off my credit cards if I help them get custody. I'm drowning in debt and I need the money. I know it's wrong, but I'm desperate. They said all I have to do is testify about her being unstable. The room went silent. Catherine's face turned white. My parents' lawyer started shuffling his papers. Janet, the CPS worker, looked between all of us with raised eyebrows. You recorded that? Catherine whispered. I record everything now, Patricia said. Learned that from your sister. My father stepped toward my bed. Enough of this circus. Give me my grandson. Security! Linda called out. My father actually reached for Lucas, trying to pull him from my arms. I screamed and turned my body to shield my baby. 2 security guards rushed in and grabbed my father. Don't you touch my baby! I yelled. He's not your baby! My father shouted as they dragged him out. You're an unfit mother. We'll prove it. My mother followed, but not before looking at Janet. Check her history. Check everything. You'll see we're right. The room felt too quiet after they left. Lucas was crying and I was shaking. Janet sat down in the visitor chair and sighed. I've been doing this job for 15 years, she said. I've seen a lot of family dysfunction, but this, she gestured at the papers scattered everywhere. This is something else. Linda started gathering evidence. These medical records are forged. Look at the letterhead. This hospital didn't have a psychiatric ward in 2009. And this doctor's signature? He died in 2007. Janet examined the papers more carefully. You're right. These are definitely falsified. Can I show you something? I asked. I pulled up a video on my phone from 2 years ago. It showed my mother coaching Catherine on what to say about me. Tell them she's always been unstable. Tell them about the time she cried at Christmas. Make it sound worse than it was. Catherine sank into a chair. I didn't know they were recording me too. They weren't, I said. I was. I've been documenting everything for years. Janet took notes on everything. She watched more of my compilation video. She examined the forged documents. She listened to the recordings Patricia had saved. By the time she finished, it was dark outside. I need to file a report, she said finally. But not the kind your parents expected. Filing false CPS reports is a crime. Forging medical documents is a crime. Attempting to take a child under false pretenses is a crime. So Lucas is safe? I asked, holding him tighter. Your son is perfectly safe with you, Janet assured me. But I recommend getting a restraining order immediately. Your parents have shown they're willing to go to extreme lengths. Linda nodded. I'll file the paperwork tonight. Emergency order first, then we'll make it permanent. Over the next 3 days, everything moved fast. Linda filed for restraining orders against my parents, Catherine, and even Gerald. The hospital put security alerts on my room. No one could visit without being on my approved list. But my family wasn't done. Relatives started choosing sides and showing up at the hospital. Aunt Rebecca drove 6 hours to see me. I hadn't talked to her in years because my parents had told everyone she was crazy. I saw your video, she said, holding my hand. Everything makes sense now. They did the same thing to me. She told me about her wedding 20 years ago. How she'd refused to let Harold walk her down the aisle because he'd been inappropriate with her as a teenager. My parents had spread rumors that she was having an affair with her boss, made up stories about her being unstable. She lost her job and most of the family cut her off. I have recordings too, she said. I started keeping them after I lost my job. Your mom admitting she made up the affair. Your dad laughing about how they taught me a lesson. Uncle Harold showed up the next day claiming I'd always been dramatic. But when Linda questioned him about specific incidents, he fumbled. Well, I never actually saw her do anything, he admitted, but her parents told me she was troubled. So you're repeating hearsay? Linda asked. It's not hearsay if it's family, he said, but even he looked unsure. More relatives came forward. Cousin Jennifer admitted my parents had threatened to cut her off if she didn't harass me about the name. Aunt Carol revealed they'd been planning this for months, ever since they found out I was pregnant. They had meetings, Carol said. Actual planning meetings about how to get custody. They assigned us all roles. I'm so sorry I participated. The real blow came when my parents made their biggest mistake. They submitted falsified medical records to the court as part of their emergency custody petition. The records claimed I'd been diagnosed with bipolar disorder when I was 12 and had been refusing treatment ever since. Linda caught the error immediately. This is impossible. The hospital name didn't have a psychiatric ward for children. And these dates? She would have been at summer camp according to her school records. The DA's office got involved after that. Forging medical records was serious. Using them in a custody case made it worse. My parents had crossed from family drama into actual criminal behavior. Their lawyer dropped them when he realized they'd lied to him about the documents. He filed a motion to withdraw from the case citing ethical violations. No other lawyer in town would take them after word spread about the forgeries. During the emergency hearing for the restraining orders, the judge reviewed everything: the video compilation, the forged documents, testimony from Patricia, Rebecca, and 3 other family members who'd come forward. Janet's report stating the CPS claims were fraudulent. My parents represented themselves, which went about as well as you'd expect. My mother cried about how she just wanted to protect her grandchild. My father ranted about his rights as a grandfather. Neither of them could explain the forged medical records. I've seen a lot of family disputes, the judge said, but the level of manipulation and deception here is extraordinary. The evidence shows a clear pattern of abuse, harassment, and now criminal behavior. She granted permanent restraining orders against my parents, Catherine, and Gerald. They couldn't come within 500 feet of me or Lucas. Any contact would result in immediate arrest. She also ordered them to pay all my legal fees and referred the case for criminal prosecution. You have systematically harassed your daughter, attempted to steal her child, and committed fraud in the process, the judge told my parents. This court will not tolerate such behavior. 6 months later, they stood trial for harassment and filing false reports. I had to testify, which was harder than I expected. Sitting in that courtroom, looking at the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, I felt mostly sad. They were found guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced them to 2 years probation and mandatory counseling. They also had to pay fines and were banned from filing any reports about me with any agency.